Hello everybody, welcome back to the Captain's Log, the daily drive. Just did my turn to Philadelphia and back. Easy peasy, but it is 9:30, so I've lost most of the day, all of the day. So I have enough time to get home and go to bed, rest up, because tomorrow I have a 3-day trip beginning. And after that 3-day trip, I have 1 day off, and I have to go to Dallas where we have recurrent training, and I'll be gone for 4 additional days. So I'm starting to run kind of ragged with not being home, but I am going to give it my best shot and try to get home and go to sleep, get some rest, and do what I'm supposed to do. So today's trip began as I arrived at the aircraft. We were in a 737-800 NG. That's a 737-800 next generation. It is a 175-seat aircraft with 4 flight attendants and the 2 pilots. So when I arrived, I met with my first officer. I've worked with him before, but it's been a long time. It's been a few years. I can't remember anything negative or bad about him, and he did such a fantastic job. He's a sharp man, and the trip was uneventful for all intents and purposes. So when I met with him, reintroduced myself, and he's in his early 50s. He's a father of 3, 2 in college, in their 20s, and an 18-year-old at home. He's been here with the company for 6 years. So it started out like that. After our introduction, he went out and he did a pre-flight. I arrived at the airplane, I would say 45 minutes to close to an hour before departure, but time goes by fast, and when I arrived, he did the pre-flight, and I did all of my checks on the aircraft as I was briefing the crew. So typically I take my iPad and I look at the weather so that I can give them an assessment of what it's going to be like for that entire flight. So the beginning of my briefing included a detailed explanation of the status of the plane. So the airplane had a seal on the aft galley door. So there's 2 doors in the back of the airplane where they call it service doors, where they service the airplanes, and then there's one in the front, and then the passenger entrance. So this airline, and most airlines act the same way. They don't take anything for granted. They address every little nitpicky thing. So at some point in the past, somebody saw a little tear on the rubber of the seal. It's really, it could go on flying like that for a decade and nothing will happen. It's just a little rubber seal, kind of like the rubber seal around the door of your car. And so I pointed out to them that somebody else had already seen it, and maintenance was aware of it. They inspected it and make sure that it did not affect the safety of the flight. So that was all, that was something that everybody was aware of already. There were a couple of other items, small items, a couple of lights in the cockpit that that had been addressed. I'm not going to get into the specifics of it, but they were really non-safety related. But they were also noted that they were, they had to be repaired within the next 10 days. When the first officer came back from the walk around, he came back and showed me a picture of a left main tire, and that left main tire was showing some thread around the inner part of the tire. Now I want to give you an idea of what these tires are like. This tire, man, I don't know what size it is exactly, but this tire weighs about 300 to 400 pounds, just one, and there's two on each side. And this tire is approximately 4.5 feet tall, and it is as thick as a tree trunk. So this is a huge tire. This is a big deal. So when he said, hey, the condition of the tire is poor, well, I'm not a mechanic. My job is to bring somebody who is an expert at maintenance to take a look at it, and then they make that decision as to whether that requires a change or not. So I did that. I called maintenance, and maintenance took a look at the tire, and by this point we're already boarding passengers. We're trying to move things quickly to leave early, and we're boarding the passengers, and the maintenance technician comes on the cockpit, and he says, listen, I believe that tire needs to be replaced. I was like, oh man, okay, so the tire needs to be replaced. He says, yes, it's worn. It's not a safety issue, but you know how this airline is. They, safety first, so they don't want to take any chances, and they rather just replace it. I said, okay, that's the safest thing to do. How long will that take? He says it will take 30 minutes. Okay. I said, well, we're already boarding passengers. Can we do that? And he says, I'm not supposed to be I'm not supposed to be changing a tire because we have to jack the airplane. It's 170,000 pounds, approximately. He said, we need to jack the airplane up and remove the tire like you would do on a car. And he said, now I could do it once everyone is seated. So everybody was sitting down. I made the announcement. I let everyone know that the airplane required a tire change. And, and we either deplane everyone to do it, or everyone agrees to remain in their seats. No one can get up and walk around because we don't want the weight shifting on the airplane while it's on jacks. So we proceeded to, everybody, was informed not to leave their seats. And so the maintenance personnel proceeded to change the tire. It only took about 20 minutes, and documented it on the logbook, and then we were ready to go. So that was our delay of the day due to a tire change. Once we took off, it was a nice, smooth ride all the way to Philadelphia. Upon arrival into Philadelphia, we had to do an ILS approach. It wasn't like weather minimums weren't that low. I think maybe there was a 1,300 foot ceiling, so the clouds were at up down to 1,300 feet. So and the visibility was, in my estimate, it was about 7 miles. So obviously above 1,500 feet, you can't see anything, so you have to come in on the approach. But then once we got below 1,300 feet, we broke out of the clouds, and there we were on, we could see the runway. And let's see, I'm trying to program my GPS here while I'm driving. I still get lost going home. So we did the approach. We did the approach. It was a converging ILS approach because they were using see runway 9 right in Philadelphia, and they were also using, I think it was runway 17. So we ended up using the 9 right converging ILS approach, and I used the heads-up display. The heads-up display is a mechanism in the 737. It's only on the captain's side, and it lowers in front of your face, and it gives you a pictorial of what's in front of you, a very precise depiction of the airspeed, altitude, and the environment. And it is typically, when you use the HUD, it is a captain-only approach because only the captain has it on his side. But we also are required to practice and do approaches with it in good weather conditions so that we can stay sharp using it. Now, I really like this piece of equipment, and I use it very frequently because it enhances the precision of what I'm doing. It makes it so precise, and it's always 100% spot on. So I used it for practice because I'm going to training in the next few days, and it was a really nice approach. When we landed, we used what's called an auto brake 3. We have auto brake 2, 3, and maximum. When you use auto brake maximum, I mean, this thing has carbon fiber brakes, and when these brakes come on, you've never seen 150 to 170,000 pounds come to a stop quicker than that. And the way that you disengage it is the pilot has to press on the brakes a little bit harder than it's applying it itself, and then that disengages it, and you override the system. So I came in with auto brake 3 because it was a little bit wet, and I wanted to make sure that the anti-skid system, brought us to a stop without me having to use too much force. When we landed, we went to the gate. We proceeded to our gate, and that was the end of the flight. Didn't have any issues. Everything worked out really well. The climate was good. Now we were going to fly as passengers back in that same airplane. So we were going to do what's called a deadhead. I mentioned that earlier in the other video. So we deadheaded back to Orlando, and we were deadheading in the same plane that we flew up in. Let's see. But we did have a different crew because the crew that we arrived at in Philadelphia with were going to spend the night in Philadelphia. So there was a change of crew, and we came back to Orlando. Now, let's see. So I sat in the back. I looked at my iPad. I read the news a little bit. I caught up with some current events, and snoozed for about an hour, and made it back home uneventfully. Now, there was one negative thing. I guess it's part of the programming, so I am going to talk about it. The other captain, when we exchanged the airplane, brought to my attention, since I was deadheading in the back, as I was reboarding, he pulled me aside and he said, hey, did you guys use the weather radar? The weather radar in the aircraft it's in the nose cone of the airplane, and the weather radar can look ahead, over 100 miles, and it shows us any weather patterns so that we can take action and circumnavigate that. Now, typically, our company policies are that we maintain 20 miles away from any intense storms, preferably to the upwind side. So what that means is that if the wind is blowing this way, blowing the storm that way, we stay on this side of it, on the upwind side of it, so that we don't have the wind, the shear, or the turbulence coming off of the storm towards us. So yes, we typically try to stay upwind or above it. Sometimes you have to fly downwind of it, and that's okay, but you need to give yourself the appropriate distance. And the weather radar helps us see this in advance so that we can make the decisions. I mean, we're traveling at 500 miles an hour, so if you do the math, you know, we're covering a lot of distance on a per minute basis. If in 60 seconds, if in 60 minutes we're traveling 500 miles, well then do the math. You know, in 60 seconds, in 1 minute, 500 divided by 60 is, do the math. So it's almost 10 miles per minute. So if we have to deviate, 20 miles, that's not that big of a deal. It's 2 minutes, just 2.5 minutes. You circumnavigate it, you avoid it, keep everyone safe. That's the proper thing to do, and that's what we use the weather radar for. Now, at the end of the flight, it is the first officer's responsibility, as well as mine, to turn that weather radar off as soon as you exit the runway. And apparently, the weather radar had not been turned off. Now, that does pose some hazard to personnel on the ground, and it could be hazardous to equipment on the ground. It could ignite gas from a distance. So, man, maybe I shouldn't have put this in the video. The entire time that we were maneuvering the airplane on the ground, we were away from vehicles and personnel, so there was no safety issue at any time. However, the pilot that got the airplane from us, he was upset that because he had to do the pre-flight. So to do the pre-flight, they have to walk in front of the plane, and so that those X-rays or those weather that weather radar signal, you know, was impacting him. It didn't hurt him, but you know, you're not supposed to have it on. I'm not gonna lie, it's not the first and it's not the last time that the weather radar has not been turned off. In fact, we even have it on a checklist that says weather radar off, and we've both verified it's off. And I can tell you that we did that checklist today, and I verified that it was off, and the first officer verified that it was off. You know, I don't know if the other pilot's co-pilot, while testing the system, inadvertently turned it on, or the pilot himself turned it on inadvertently. Stuff happens, you know. But I felt bad about that because I felt like we didn't do our job. So I was apologetic. And, you know, as I tell all the young guys here, you know, when you make a mistake, you need to own it. And I could not say with 100% certainty that we turned it off. I felt that we turned it off, and I remember distinctly looking at it, and as we did the checklist, weather radar off. But this man says that it was on. So I was not going to try to defend the position that, hey, we turned it off, something else must have happened, you guys fight it out between you two, maybe your first officer. I wasn't going to throw him under the bus. So I did the professional and responsible thing, and I just apologized. I said, look, I'm really sorry, it was unintentional. I felt like we turned it off. We did the checklist, and I remember looking at it, but you know, obviously somebody else turned it back on, and whether that was one of us or that was one of you is a question that, you know, that we don't have an answer to. So very sorry, you guys. I take it very seriously, and I'll make sure that that doesn't ever happen again. But you know, nobody got hurt and nothing happened to anybody on the ground or equipment. So it was just an oversight on somebody's part. And it was an oversight on somebody's part, and that was that. And the responsible thing was to address it with the other pilot and to take responsibility for it, which we did. And yeah, that's the end of it. So that was my trip. That was my trip to Philadelphia tonight. So I hope you like the story. I hope you like the excitement. So this is the Captain's Log Daily Drive signing off. Have a great night, everyone.